Good afternoon, and welcome to the third panel of our Caltech PST Art Symposium. My name is Claudia Bohn-Spector, and I'm the curator of the exhibition that you hopefully all saw. And I have the distinct pleasure this afternoon to introduce you to three of our artists. And the first one being Elin-o'Hara Slavick, Jane Brucker, and Shana Mabari. And just in terms of what we're hoping to do here today, I'm going to give you like the briefest of introductions to the exhibition. I have a little video for you. It's going to make you all feel warm and fuzzy about this exhibition. And then we're going to have each artist come to the podium and introduce themselves, show a little bit of the work that they have done prior to being included in this exhibition, and kind of setting the stage so you get a little bit of background on them. And then we have our little panel discussion and opening to audience questions. The first thing I'd like to do is thank the organizers of this event, specifically Caltech and the James Michelin Distinguished Lecture Series who funded it. Extreme gratitude to the Getty for having envisioned this initiative and for actually, funding everything that we do here in terms of the exhibition and the catalog, which I hope you had the opportunity. Actually, we don't have the opportunity to purchase them here, right?
Not today.
Not today, but do go to Amazon.com or to the Caltech bookstore, and there you will find it. I'm also told to remind you, please, to turn off your cell phones and to locate the exit nearest you in case of an unexpected turbulence. And with that, I will move right into a very brief introduction to our exhibition. And I picked this slide here because I just took it the other day because it includes an object that on some level really encapsulates nicely what this exhibition is all about. And what you see here is, of course, Robert Oppenheimer when he was an assistant professor at Caltech. And in the back there, here in blue, you see the Robert Bakker's personal radiation meter when he was directing the G division, G standing for gadget, at the Los Alamos site when they planned for the Trinity test. And this little black rectangle that you see here was his personal radiation shield, and which he used to actually look at the test while it was happening. And I selected this because what we were trying to do in this exhibition and in the book is really talk about scientific observation. And the key questions that we've asked is who may see, what do people see, and how do they represent what they see? So on many different levels, and as you kind of walk through the exhibition, you will be confronted with that question in one form or another. So we had 6 different sites on campus, 4 indoor, 2 outdoor. And the first site was called the Infinite Lawn, and it took place at Lynn Center, or is still taking place at Lynn Center, and started with this beautiful solar projection of the sun, and which we framed to really kind of highlight this as the entrance to our show. Here you see the back side of it. The design is by Tim Durfee, and who is in the audience. Thank you, Tim. And Jennifer Ryder was our graphic designer who created really a magnificent case for our exhibition. And the next section happened at the Gates Annex and was called Time Stream. And Time Stream was really about how people over the last 500 years have envisioned the universe. And Caltech has a wonderful collection of original books and Copernicus, Galileo, and so forth. So they were displayed in here, and you can see them here again in Tim's architecture. And James, who is here, James Griffith, his wonderful moon painted with tar from the La Brea tar pits. And of course, my C-3PO, which I found at the Caltech IT lab, and that had to be in the exhibition. Powers of 10 happened in the Dabney Lounge, and here you see Leah Halloran's specifically commissioned piece called Powers of 10 that is just a wonderful kind of compilation of this idea, Powers of 10. And Powers of 10, of course, was a movie created in the 1970s by, I'm blanking out on their names. Charles and Ray Eames, yes, thank you very much. And that really reflected this idea of scale, because we had so many images of minuscule little things and then things that were infinitesimally large. And this kind of zooming in and out was really part of that particular display. So here I'm just showing you a couple of slides. This one, in the background there, you see Chris O'Leary's air shower. We try to blend archival materials with original works of art. And here is Lida Albuquerque's installation in its beautiful and pristine form that I am sad to say no longer exists in this form, but it's been significantly interacted with, as I guess is what happens when you're doing public art. And here, I will just show you this little video. right? I'm so happy this video exists because once the exhibition is gone, that's all we're going to have left. And of course, our catalog. So I'm going to show you just a few more slides. This is Shana Mabari's work. She will come up to speak soon. And one of the things that, as I was listening to the panel this morning, we talked about, you know, in Chris's talk about campus, Caltech campus being a theater for human action. And it occurred to me right there and then that that's precisely what these things do. They provided so much opportunity for interaction, for kids running around, and the movie sort of captured that, and reflecting the arcades of the original building. And and I've been on campus so many times, different times a day. It's just a beautiful work that really activates this part of the campus. So we're going to talk more about those. This is the work of Ellen, and she will, you will have seen in the Dabbling Lounge. This work is called Hiroshima Flowers, I'm sorry, and we're going to talk more about that. I just wanted you to see the work in the context of our exhibition. So Ellen has two works in the exhibition, and this is Jane Brucker's work, that you would have seen in Gates Annex. So she interacted with the actual space itself, and including objects from the archives, like this little bottle on the left, which is filled with a mysterious substance, which maybe Peter can tell us more about. And with that, I would like to ask our first artist to come to the podium, which is Shana Mabari. And Shana is an independent contemporary artist living and working in Los Angeles, and central to her artistic practice is a focus on the intersection of art, science, and technology as articulated in sculptures, installations, and immersive environments. So please welcome Shana Mabari. So you just right pop that, right? And then when the next slide comes up, then this one, that one.
All right. Good afternoon. I'd like to begin by thanking Claudia for her brilliant curation of Crossing Over. Crossing Over Art and Science here at Caltech, as well as Peter Colopy and Bailey Westerhoff for all your help and support during the exhibition. Also, a very big thank you to my sponsor, The Island, and the Getty for their generous support. My name is Shana Mabari. I am a contemporary artist, a native Angelino. I live and work in Los Angeles. Central to my practice is a focus on the intersection of art, science, and technology, as articulated in my sculptures, installations, and immersive environments. I work primarily with acrylic, steel, and reflective materials. My focus is on the aesthetic concerns of the light and space movement through material and form. My decade-long relationship with the master fabricator Jack Brogan, who restored numerous works for the Getty, informed and crystallized my understanding of acrylic materials and building methods. My engagement with Caltech began in 2002 when I started designing optical illusion environments for Dr. Shinzuki Shimojo, currently the Gertrude Baltimore Professor of Experimental Psychology. Our work was exhibited in venues such as the Vision Science Society meetings in Sarasota, Florida, and Close Encounters Science Meets Art at the National Taiwan University in Taipei. We were awarded a patent in 2004 for our dynamic spatial illusions. I have also collaborated with experts in robotics, engineering, and neuromorphic engineering. The images shown are of my installation, Spectrum Petals, the first artwork visitors encounter in Crossing Over Art and Science at Caltech, 1920 to 2020. I hope that you've all had a chance to experience the work. The Petals guide visitors along the architecturally ornate Bechtel Mall, built as a grand entryway to Caltech in the 1930s. Spectrum petals consist of 7 mirrored spectral colored cylinders, each 38 to 48 inches in diameter. The spectrum petals reference the 7 spectral colors that correspond to the narrow band on the electromagnetic radiation spectrum that constitutes visible light from 750 to 380 nanometers. Isaac Newton coined the word spectrum in 1671 in his book Optics. Spectrum is Latin for appearance, and Newton used the term to describe the rainbow spectrum produced by sunlight passing through a prism. He saw the colors red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and violet, but he added the color indigo as a seventh color because he wanted to relate the colors to the 7 days of the week, moons and planets known at the time, and notes of the musical scale. This was a more palatable way to present scientific information, as if new research corresponded to an existing norm, then it was less likely to cause problems with the church like imprisonment or death. Humans are obsessed with color. It represents science, art, emotion, religion, philosophy, hierarchy, status, just to name a few. Within the past 500 years, more than 3,000 books about color have been published. The oldest paint-making workshop in the Stone Ages was found in a cave in South Africa called Blombos. They would find natural particles to grind into powder and mix with sticky things to apply to objects or themselves. Color differentiates us from other species as we engage with color outside of ourselves in a way that surpasses our two tasks of survival and procreation. My engagement with the astronomical and aeronautical sciences began in 2016 when my sculpture Astral Challenger, a tribute to the city of Lancaster's achievements in the aerospace industry and to commemorate the 1986 Space Shuttle Challenger disaster. The permanent sculpture is a 20-foot-tall stainless steel and acrylic landmark which evokes the iconic silhouette of a rocket. Its minimalist form has an illusion of near weightlessness, with a changing play of light both by day and through nighttime illusion. The 8 blue acrylic fins represent the memory of the 7 astronauts that were lost, as well as one to represent the family and community that still grieve. The goal of the commission was to convey unity and remembrance through art. In 2018, I was selected to be the first artist to fly aboard a mission of NASA's Stratospheric Observatory for Infrared Astronomy, SOFIA, which uses a 2.7-meter telescope mounted in a customized 747, flying to a maximum altitude of 45,000 feet to study such astronomical phenomena such as black holes and star formation. The artist residency inspired a diverse body of work that includes the Meteor series, a gem-like acrylic sculptures, as well as 3 series of prints on metallic paper, Planeta, Constellatio, and Stella. Each drawing that forms the basis of the prints originated in astronomical observations taken under the nighttime Mediterranean skies on Ibiza, Spain, where I spent the summers of 2018 and 2019 working on the series. The drawings incorporate astronomical-specific mathematical information, including magnitude, radius, light years from Earth, volume, mass, or number of moons, lends a simplicity to the work as an almost birth certificate to the star, planet, or constellation being observed. The Planeta and Constellatio works show 2 overlapping views of the same subject, a positive view seen looking up from the Earth and a negative view looking down onto the Earth. My desire was to focus on the concept that we are part of space at all times, moving very quickly. We often think of space as something outside of ourselves that we will get to later when it works with our personal schedule, versus a never-ending, never-slowing-down constant. The NASA residency also yielded the Artist Book Space, a collaborative project in which I invited 11 individuals from an array of professional backgrounds to contribute short texts meditating on the term space, how it is used in their area of expertise. Collaborators include Susan Kohler's Space in the Universe. She holds a PhD in theoretical astrophysics. Raul Guzman's Space and Exhibition, curator at the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures. Kanan Eng's Space and Intelligence. He is with the Institute of Neuroinformatics at the University of Zurich. And Janet Cavandy's Space and Exploration. She is a NASA astronaut and previous director of Glenn Research Center. Her essay has my favorite line, which is, "I unbuckled my harness and floated out of my seat." The final work I will share is from the 2014 Elometric, a triptych of massive diamond cube and rectangle-shaped sculptures constructed with colored acrylic panels. Using internal LED illumination for nighttime display, the work was created for the City of West Hollywood's Art on the Outside public art program. As reported in the Los Angeles Times, the installation is a study of color, geometry, light, and scale. Originally introduced in July of 2014 for a one-year period, Elometric was extended for an additional year. I received a grant from the City of West Hollywood to create a short documentary film about the making of Elometric that premiered at the 2015 WeHo at 30 Film Festival and Digital Time Capsule. Thank you very much for your time, and any additional information, I'm here, or you can visit my website at shanamabari.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Shana. And now I would like you to meet Elin-o'Hara Slavick, who is an interdisciplinary artist, poet, professor, curator, critic, and activist. She's currently an artist in residence at UC Irvine, and in the spring of 2022, I corrected that typo, she was the Huntington Research and Art Fellow at Caltech, which is how I met her. Before coming to California, Ellen served as a professor of visual art, theory, and practice at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill for 27 years. Ellen, please join me on the podium.
Okay, great. That goes forward. Okay. Hello. First, I want to thank Claudia so much for her extraordinary curatorial vision, and to Peter Colopy, who taught me so much during my fellowship here and helped me make some of the work that you'll see. It was so great to work with him. And I also want to thank Loma, who I think is still here, because she helped me so much. So thank you, Loma. So image making is often at the heart of scientific inquiry, which we've seen today and see throughout the show. And Dark Archive is the working title for a book in process about archives and imaging, an idea born in the Caltech archives while I was here. And this is the first image I saw in the Caltech archives that I found online before my fellowship began, and I put in radiation. And this is George Beadle and Ernst Anderson at the Caltech's experimental farm in Arcadia, inspecting dwarf mutant corn, which was grown from progeny of seed exposed to radiation at the Bikini Atoll atom bomb test. And this is one of 60 drawings that I did of places that the United States has bombed, that I did in 1999 of the Bikini Atoll from where the irradiated corn seeds came. The Bravo test in 1954 was the most powerful bomb ever detonated by the US, a 15-megaton H-bomb, vaporized 3 islands and spread radioactive debris over nearly 50,000 square miles. The history of the atomic age is intertwined with photography. The discovery of radioactivity was via a photograph, this one on the left. In 1896, Henri Becquerel placed uranium on a photographic plate to expose it to the sun, but because it was cloudy, he put it in a drawer, and then the next day he decided to process it anyway, and to his amazement, he saw the outline of the uranium on the plate that had never been exposed to light. He correctly concluded that the uranium was emitting a new kind of penetrating radiation. So following in the steps of Becquerel, I went to Hiroshima to make autoradiographs like the one on the right. And in this case, it's a fragment of an A-bomb tree that's from the Peace Museum's archive. And I placed it on X-ray film in light-tight conditions for 10 days and then exposed that X-ray film to a silver gelatin piece of paper. And surprisingly, abstract exposures were made on the X-ray film, and it's called lingering radiation, and it's in the show. And this is Hiroshima Flowers that's also in the show, and it's dead flowers from Hijiyama Hill in Hiroshima that features prominently in John Hersey's book. It's the hill that people went to think they would be safe, but they weren't. Many people died there. And these flowers look like bullet holes or rips in the sky or stars or illuminated radiation. And this is the first thing I made when I got to Caltech, an attempt to organize and make connections between everything and to keep me focused on all these dark matters that seep into each other. So in the class that I taught here, Making Data Visual, we read about Cornelia Hess Honegger. And Honegger is an artist making laborious paintings, often with a one-haired brush, of insects that she collects from nuclear facilities all over the world. And Joan Davis writes in Honegger's book, After Chernobyl, she writes, "Pictures record changes before science knows what to look for and long before it knows what to measure." And Honegger herself writes in her book, Heteroptera, The Beautiful and the Other, Images of a Mutating World. I am convinced that scientific drawings and paintings were very often pre-cognitive pictures rather than illustrations. The actual scientific research process took place during and through the picture making. For scientists, the pictorial process was a way of achieving knowledge. And I sort of became obsessed with that idea while I was working in the archives. I talked to Peter about this a lot. So I'm going to share several interrelated projects I worked at here at Caltech in 2022. So this is the project that I applied for the fellowship for. This is the top image is a blue bottle, and it's one of 90,000 artifacts in the Hiroshima Peace Museum archive. And it's a bottle that's been deformed from the heat of the A-bomb. And I proposed making a metal sculptural replica through the 3D printing process of the bottle to be installed on campus. It didn't end up happening because JPL didn't end up printing it for me, but it will happen at some point. But these are the two plastic prototypes that were printed here in the 3D lab at Caltech. I made silver gelatin darkroom prints of archival negatives and transparencies of cloud chambers, wind tunnels, mostly white men and machines, scientific experiments, and abstractions. So here is a 4x5 color transparency of a nuclear test, and my darkroom print, sorry, I want to move that cursor, and a darkroom print made from layering two of these color transparencies in the darkroom, and I called it Double Doom. While working in the archives, I became acutely aware of the abundance of photographic images that function both as document and experiment. Often the image-making process itself led to the acquisition of knowledge, proving a theory, like the cloud chamber photographs, while simultaneously exposing us to the destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki from atomic bombs developed in large part at Caltech. So while waiting for the glass lantern slides to be prepared by Loma for me so I could print them in the abandoned Sky Atlas darkroom that I got working again, I started to throw away boxes of the fogged and outdated paper. There were hundreds of boxes of paper left in the darkroom that I could use, which was amazing. It was like a kid in a candy shop. But when I started to throw them away, I thought, wait, I'm going to try to paint a mushroom cloud on the paper and see what would happen. And 6 hours later, I made the first 30 of these chemical drawings that you see here of nuclear tests. So using brushes, I used the fixer first to make the white, and it functioned as a resist to the developer. And then I would apply the developer for the blacks. And this became a series of 528 photochemical drawings of the 528 atmospheric nuclear tests that have been done to date. Each one a nuclear bomb detonated near civilians. And this is just 2 rooms in the show. I've shown this project twice in its entirety, and this is in Colorado. And there were 5 rooms full like this. And to see them all together is pretty overwhelming. It was really incredible to see the audience sort of be overwhelmed by them. So I'm trying to make meaning through new images of profound historical importance that inform our current condition of constant violence, the ever-proliferating military-industrial complex, war, and aftermath. How do we reconcile science and politics, genius and flawed ideology, institutional memory, and inhumane practices? Maybe we can't reconcile it, but we can try to represent it. So in 1930s, Harold Edgerton, an MIT engineering professor, pioneered ultra-high-speed stroboscopic photography to reveal aspects of the moving world previously invisible to the naked eye. During World War II, he worked with the Atomic Energy Commission to develop a camera, the Rapatronic, capable of capturing the fleeting incandescent flash of a nuclear explosion. Edgerton and his assistant set up equipment on a tower 7 miles from a nuclear test site, and using exposures as short as 1/1000th of a second, recorded this ominous glowing shape, hovering like an alien life form or a colossal balloon. And this is my chemical drawing rendition of it on the right. I also made 200 collages on defective or duplicate Sky Atlas silver gelatin prints, 14 by 14 inches each. I found them in the darkroom. I gave a set to the archive. Well, they were interested that I found them, of the entire sky from the Palomar Observatory. I only used materials collected or made at Caltech, like these two, with test reject prints of mine from the darkroom. And on the left, we saw an image like it earlier in the day. This is Carl Anderson superimposed in a B-29 bomber with a cloud chamber, collaged with another man and another cloud chamber related to Holy Moses, an aircraft rocket from 1944. And on the right, one of my nuclear tests from a color transparency. The collages include machines and bombs, scientists and exposures, landscapes and illustrations hovering in space. And here are Robert Oppenheimer and Albert Einstein. In 1947, Einstein wrote, "Since the completion of the first atomic bomb, nothing has been accomplished to make the world safer from war, while much has been done to increase the destructiveness of war. In the first 2 years of the atomic era, another phenomenon is to be noted. The public, having been warned of the horrible nature of atomic warfare, has done nothing about it, and to a large extent has dismissed the warning from its consciousness." I also made a series of cyanotypes of objects from the Caltech archives, and these are actually in the show, in the Powers of 10 show. These are rocket heads, and I don't know if you know, but Caltech produced over 1 million missile rockets during World War II. And the cyanotype process, which is a sunprint process, was invented by astronomer and chemist John Herschel in 1842. And these are cyanotypes that Peter helped me make of molecular models, some of which are also in the Powers of 10 section of the show. Interconnected planets, a game of jacks, a modernist chandelier, a sculptural object of dynamic beauty, animated yet still in a sea of blue. So the Trinity test, and this is one of my 60 bomb drawings, the Trinity test was the first test of a nuclear weapon by the United States. Less than a month later, we dropped Little Boy on Hiroshima, and 3 days later, Fat Man on Nagasaki. I was surprised to find several negatives and prints of the Trinity test in the Caltech archives, the exact one I used as reference of my drawing decades earlier. And I didn't know until I was at Caltech that the detonators for the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were in part designed here at Caltech. And of course, this makes sense because many people here worked on the Manhattan Project, including the three Roberts, Oppenheimer, Christie, and Brucker, among others. Project Camel encompassed the work performed by Caltech in support of the Manhattan Project during World War II. And this included the development of detonators, testing of bomb shapes dropped from B-29 Superfortress bombers, and the Salt Wells pilot plant, where explosive components of nuclear weapons were manufactured. The full caption for this drawing on the right of Hiroshima comes from Howard Zinn's book, Breaking the Silence, and he actually wrote the foreword to the book of this project called Bomb After Bomb, A Violent Cartography. He writes, "The atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, turned into powder and ash in a few moments the flesh and bones of 140,000 men, women, and children. 3 days later, a second atomic bomb dropped on Nagasaki killed 70,000 instantly. And the next 5 years, another 130,000 inhabitants of those two cities died of radiation poisoning. Those figures do not include countless other people who were left alive, but maimed, poisoned, disfigured, and blinded. A Japanese schoolgirl recalled years later that it was a beautiful morning. She saw a B-29 fly by and then a flash. She put her hands up, and my hands went right through my face. She saw a man without feet walking on his ankles." I am struck by the disappearance of whole cities and peoples, structures and nature, not just by bombs and war, the A-bomb and natural disasters, but by deliberate and calculated progress, development, profit, and growth. As Paul Virilio says, when you build a sailing vessel, you guarantee a shipwreck. And that's one of my favorite quotes in the whole world. When you build a sailing vessel, you guarantee a shipwreck. So these three people are dear friends of mine, and they took a break from rehearsing the annual play Grandchildren of Hiroshima to make this cyanotype with me on the banks of a river once filled with corpses. I stand with Nihon Hidankyo, the Japanese group of atomic bomb survivors who received this year's Nobel Peace Prize. At the ceremony in Norway, Mr. Tanaka said, while accepting the award, "It is the heartfelt desire of the Hibakusha A-bomb survivors, that rather than depending on the theory of nuclear deterrence, which assumes the possession and use of nuclear weapons, we must not allow the possession of a single nuclear weapon. The chair of the Nobel Committee said, "It is naive to believe our civilization can survive a world order in which global security depends on nuclear weapons. The world is not meant to be a prison in which we await collective annihilation." Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. And I think it will come as no surprise to you that the whole section on the Manhattan Project that is really a turning point in the entire exhibition was greatly inspired by the work that Ellen has done. So thank you for informing my process. And yeah, I mean, it's been incredible. I'd like to introduce the third artist, and you see there is quite a range we have here, and I think that should make for a really interesting conversation. And I would like to invite up to the podium Jane Brucker, my friend Jane, who uses installation and performance to engage viewers through contemplation, movement, and ritual activity, combining found and archival objects and heirlooms with other materials, textiles, wood, glass, and cast metals. She explores the visceral and metaphysical. Jane is a professor and head of the drawing program at the Department of Art and Art History at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. And Jane, please come up to the podium. And
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. In 378 AD, Saint Basil of Caesarea delivered a lecture series, later written into a narrative account of the 6 days of creation. In it, he wrote, "If sometimes on a bright night, whilst gazing with watchful eyes on the inexpressible beauty of the stars, you have thought of the Creator of all things, if you have asked yourself, who is it that has dotted the heaven with such flowers, and why visible things are even more useful than beautiful, if sometimes in the day you have studied the marvels of light, if you have raised yourself by visible things to the invisible being, then you are a well-prepared observer, and you can take your place in this august and blessed amphitheater." What do scientists do? They make the invisible visible: galaxies, pulsars, atoms, and gravity waves. What do artists do? They do the same thing. They make empathy, loss, memory, spirit, and relationships visible and tangible. The objects I made in an early series that you see here on the left, called Perceptual Tools, question what and how we see. Here I use binocular prisms and vacuum cleaner components to manipulate the focus and the orientation of the viewer's vision. Sometimes I combine my work with language, such as on the left, using my own wisdom teeth to play on the idea of acquiring knowledge, or on the right, a play on Einstein's quote about God. All of the sculptural objects, performances, images, and spaces I make tell others about people I love and the experiences we share as humans. These experiences are things like being sick or falling in love. They address what it is like to watch someone die. They can convey the history of a person or a place. My work looks at the sometimes odd things we wonder about or what we observe closely when we attempt to touch the numerous numinous and the mysterious. I grew up in San Diego. My grandmother would tell me stories about her experience as a single mother living through the 1929 Depression and how she learned to save everything: matchbooks, photographs, newspaper clippings, bits of leftover fabric, chipped ceramics, and knickknacks. When she married my grandfather, Harold, a California desert explorer who often took us out to camp and stargaze in remote areas, the narratives of the natural world and the world of domesticity were combined for me in a collection of special objects. Every rock and every button told a story. When my grandparents passed away in 1995, I inherited a treasure trove of family memorabilia, tools, and old furniture. These items became the reference material for almost all of my aesthetic decisions from that point on. On the right here, you can see my piece, Building Book, made from my grandmother's pearl necklace and my grandfather's well-used, soft-bound Kidder Parker Architect and Builder's Handbook. Saving family heirlooms or collecting objects that were once owned by others is very different than other types of collecting. There is an often tactile physicality and a poignant value attached to items that have been passed down from one generation to the next. In this work, titled Lost, over 300 small objects were cast into bronze or brass, and I placed them across a large tabletop. Lost represents our everyday experiences of loss. We lose our keys. We lose our coins. Those are just examples, and they are practice for other losses that we inevitably endure. We lose relationships, we lose memories, and ultimately, we lose ourselves when we die. The slide on the right shows a detail of the tabletop from above, and on the left is a cast of my grandmother's bank book and the pencil she used to log in her deposits and her withdrawals. I care about these tiny everyday things, no matter how trivial. I see using them in my work as a way of sustaining a common, intimate, or social thread and a connection to the passing of time. For me, telling a story through materials creates longevity, even as the materials themselves, like one's body or the universe, is finite. Materials also contain memories. When I was a small child, I had names for all of my clothes based on their patterns and their colors. Clothing and textiles have always played an important part in my work. In the case of the large-scale memorial project and the performance, which you see on the right, Memorial Duet, the memories of a particular item of clothing, the memories those items of clothing can recall is the focus of over 300 panels. These panels are about 7 by 9 inches, so they're relatively small. Since 2001, I have acquired the shirts, dresses, and other clothes of those who have passed away. These items were given to me by family members, friends, or sometimes even sent to me by people that I did not know. Often there are stories that accompany these articles, and I've begun to collect these stories in a related digital project called Memorial Stories. I often find that I am the caretaker, the curator, the archivist, and a conservator of objects. Such was the case with Flora Adams' diary, seen here on the right, and on the left, an installation at House Gallery here in Pasadena. The performance used sentimental clothing and spoken text from this mid-century mid-20th century travel journal that was handwritten by Flora Adams, a woman who I knew as a child. Adams had grown up in a West Texas orphanage, and she never married. She traveled extensively in her life, often in what she described as religious pilgrimage. When Flora Adams died, she left me this diary. The piece was performed along with artist Robin Parsons and actor Leah Zhang, who each wore clothing related to a transition or a spiritual journey that they experienced in their own lives. I frequently feel drawn to tell someone's story. This was the case in utilizing the objects given to me by Theresia de Vroom, the widow of the physicist Robert Hellworth, for the exhibition here at Caltech. I started by turning Bob's leather cufflink box into a velvety stage for tiny twin Mardi Gras babies that I cast in bronze. Bob Hellworth's binoculars present both my friend Spencer Suhu's translucent image of the moon, slightly green as if made from cheese, and a fauceted red glass jewel from an old stained glass window. The red glass represents the ruby Hellworth witnessed in the early development of lasers. From 1956 to 1970, Bob was a senior research fellow here at Caltech and at the Hughes Research Laboratories. Bob's small notebook with tiny writing that you see here on the right, and it actually looks kind of big on the right, but when you see it in the diorama, it's quite small, and is currently on display. And when you look closely, you see notes about lasers, but also Bob's shopping list for dinner ingredients, people he wanted to contact, ideas he had, and questions to think about. Throughout his career, Bob contributed to the new field of photonics and to improving instruments for astronomy. We often shared the fun of looking at things together in the way artists and scientists might do. As I organize and archive materials in my studio, I see my own history or the history of others in them. I find the idea of time travel intriguing. We replay scenes of the past in our mind. We revisit our younger selves in photographs or in old letters. We remember someone we were close to who had an impact. Such is the case with this recent installation of my work at the Los Angeles Municipal Gallery, completed this year as a 2024 City of LA Master Artist Award recipient. For this project, I reconstructed and refinished my grandmother's bed as a piece of spiritual furniture and a place to rest. I used historical craft techniques such as quilting or painting stained glass, and combined those processes with unique heirloom objects from my sister-in-law, activist Mika Wawona. Mika was a key figure in establishing criteria for forest management in California and was instrumental in the creation of the California Conservation Corps and Redwood National Park. She now suffers from the ravages of Alzheimer's disease. Here, materials create an important bond between nature and domesticity, between past and present. The photo on the left is Mika in 1975, in front of a 10-foot diameter old-growth redwood, cut down by Georgia Pacific during a Virgin Grove clear cut in the adjoining area of Jackson State Forest near Big River in Northern California. This slide shows a view of the work Old Snag Spring, created from the top of a 12-foot diameter snag redwood, a long-standing dead tree on my brother's ranch. A spring ran continually from its hollow trunk, and this was the source of fresh drinking water for the entire homestead. When the tree was standing, it was always a familiar landmark and a guide on any forest walk. The tree fell over while I was working on this project. It allowed me to take this top section. In the exhibition, a bird sits within it, something from my grandparents, and it wears a crown of tiny glass beads with bits of a woman's wood and paper fan that move in the slightest breeze. On the right is a detail of a hand mirror I made for Mika, as her sense of self, or at least her memory, dissolves. It is made from layers of traditional stained painted glass. Each layer contains painted redwood leaves and the traditional gold of applied silver stain. Their color and pattern diffusing light through the glass layers, preventing one from actually seeing a reflection of oneself. Instead, in that piece, one sees through to the visible invisible and the future unknown. And while in Hand Mirror for Mika, it does not reflect oneself, this last slide shows a pair of mirrors that are related to the early perceptual tool series, like the binoculars shown in my first slide. The reflections seen in the two mirrors here are my own image as a young woman questioning my experiences of faith and femininity by using the wordplay made in, as in made in the image of God, and maiden. The two mirrors magnify the difficulty of seeing oneself and of knowing one's place in the world and in the universe. Today, as I introduce myself to you, I find it interesting that the self we see here, or the self I see here, is no longer my reflection. Rather, the slide now mirrors the constant change we experience as one looks back and one looks ahead in a stream of time.
Yes. So thank you all for being here and listening to these really terrific presentations. And one of the things that I, as a curator, of course, always enjoy is to be able to work with artists as diverse and complex and thoughtful as the three ladies here on stage. And I would like to start by asking all of you, since you are so very different in your approaches and in what you're trying to find in your creative process, of how you came to engage with science and what science has kind of afforded you that you couldn't find anywhere else. Ellen, I'm sure you have answers to that.
I always have answers.
Yes.
And questions. Well, first of all, I wanted to say, I don't think, people have said this today in many different ways, but this false binary between the separation between science and art, I just, like, I don't want to say it's a boring question, because it's like what we've been talking about, but they've never been separate. I mean, you know, Da Vinci, and I think of even Ralph Eugene Meatyard, the photographer, who was an optometrist. I mean, they're just so inextricably linked. Like John Herschel invented cyanotype in 1842, and he was a chemist and a scientist, and so it's just a false split to begin with. So I don't feel like I have to come to science. I think science is all around us all the time, and we experience it all the time. So I don't even, it's kind of a weird thing to even think about, but I will say, I was raised in an activist family, and every August 6th we went to commemorate Hiroshima in the town square of Portland, Maine, where I grew up. And so Hiroshima was always at the front of my consciousness, and to me that happened because of science, right? A lot of the research that happened here on this campus is what led to that happening then. And so to me that's just a direct, one specific among many that I could give you of how that inspired my art as an activist and a political person who makes work mostly about and against war, since 2008, primarily about radiation. But also I'm married to an epidemiologist who studies the effects of radiation on nuclear workers all over the world. And, you know, like he's in charge of the I'm not saying this to brag, I'm just letting you know. He's in charge of radiation for the UN and is in charge of the report for the last 10 years. So it's very much in my thinking, the effects of radiation, and even the smallest exposure to the lowest dose of radiation is dangerous, and it's about the cumulative effect of it. So anyway, that's all around me all the time. And I did teach a class at UNC called Visualizing Science that was actually funded by Duke University, and I had undergrads and grads, and that really affected me, looking at artists who specifically go out of their way to engage with science in their work, and vice versa. And so then I applied for this fellowship. So now it's just, I guess I'm just one of those artists who's considered a science artist, a science art person, but I think we all are as any artist kind of engages with science. You can't help it. You can't help it, just the materials you work with even. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, oh. Absolutely. Is this on?
I think so.
I think you just have to lean in.
One. There you go. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
There you go. Yes, so I agree, art and science is definitely interlinked. If you have that spark in your mind, you are constantly going back and forth from one lane to the other. I was very fortunate in the early 2000s. I was looking at graduate programs. One was at the Graduate Department of Industrial Design at Art Center, and they ended up offering me a position to be a liaison between the graduate design students and students here at Caltech. So I had some very generous introductions to different labs. Dr. Shinzuki Shimojo, who I still collaborate with today, Christoph Koch, who had a lab here. He's now with the Paul Allen Brain Institute in Seattle. And I basically spent my time in labs learning about what different graduate students were doing. And I would basically go around finding matches to have collaborations between the design students and science students. And when I found that there were an incredible amount of overlap, and when I would introduce the two students, I realized that even though their areas were very similar, they really weren't interested in collaboration. It was a little bit too early. And the goal of your design student was to produce and fabricate and go to the market. And the science student was basically to research, publish, and be funded. So I realized that was not necessarily going to go in a lot of places, and so I ended up spending a lot of time at Caltech myself and working on collaborations. Dr. Shinzuki Shimojo was very interested in vision science, particular in optical illusion environments, so I appreciate so much the visuals that we saw earlier today of being in the labs and having to understand different effects that happen and how you build those environments, or how you bring a publicly, how you design something for the public to be able to engage with those. Through that experience, I spent quite a bit of time at vision science conferences all over the world, and even though it was not particularly my area of expertise, there was a lot of overlap. So I would be sitting in an audience full of vision science students, and they were looking at contour drawings of Matisse and Picasso, talking about how many lines do you need on a two-dimensional surface for it to then move to a three-dimensional surface. And I thought, okay, well, this is crazy, because we're all the artists. We should be studying this in our first year of foundation. But the difference was that in art school, we use terms like, when is the shift, and when does the two-dimensional surface pop? How many lines do you need? But the science students were basically, wondering and researching what part of the brain fires. But there was just the overlap of that curiosity, and the areas were incredible. And I can go on forever, so I'm going to pass on.
Thanks, Shana. I think when I was in high school, I liked science and religion and art. And it was sort of upsetting to have to make a decision about what subject to major in when I went to college, and I sort of drew it out, which maybe should have given me a clue right then, a kind of diagram, and it seemed as if I chose art, I could still look at theology, and I could still look at science. And I was particularly interested in biology and doing a lot of figure drawing. And so I went and continued on in art. After I got my MFA, I thought, you know, this doesn't really feel like enough. So I did a master's degree in theology, and I ended up studying a lot of film and working in that realm, and always kind of every now and then coming back through these stories or through my experiences to thinking about the way in which science affected the world we lived in, and particularly health and healthcare, the environment. I grew up in San Diego, but I spent every summer on my brother's off-grid ranch. And so I learned about how to make submarine batteries, run your washer and dryer, and about soil and trees and all kinds of things. And then I'd come back to California and, you know, sit in traffic on the freeway. And so sort of trying to understand and bring these things together was always something that I was looking for, and it turns out now I bring those things together at a gallery that I co-host with my husband, who's a biomedical scientist and a historian of medicine, a physiologist. But in Germany, we have a gallery where we promote the conversations between artists and scientists. So any of you who are interested, it's in Germany, and we just help facilitate these conversations so that we can learn more from each other. So,
I mean, one of the things that I found interesting in working with each of you and with additional artists who have yet other approaches to science, or is that, you know, if you look a little bit at the history of art and science, you know, like the EAT movement in the 60s, you know, art and technology, that at least historically, artists have been drawn to science because of all that cool technology, right? I mean, that was the kind of the beginning. You would have, like, you know, Rauschenberg and all these people, so it was all very male, very let's get the tools, let's get the toys, and there was art and technology and so on and so forth. Working with you, and I don't know, it's because you're female or whatever. I see art kind of as a reflection of something that allows me to see science in a different way. I mean, I don't know, is that something that you can share? It's like I've learned from each and every one of you something different about the interrelationship between art and science. And that's true actually for the entire exhibition. We had all these different disciplines, we had all these different people, all these different practitioners, and everybody brought their own kind of unique story to it. And so I think in a way there is a development toward a more profound engagement between art and science. And I agree with you totally that the distinction between the two is completely arbitrary. You know, the more you think about it, the more you realize that scientists and artists are intensely curious people who throw stuff against the wall until it sticks, right? And I mean, it's kind of putting it simplistically, but I mean, how do you feel like that your creative practice can actually open up windows onto science or onto a world dominated by science as opposed to, say, dominated by art? And where do you find your voice in that? You want me to go?
Well, I have a couple ideas. In the Bomb After Bomb book that was my first book, anthropologist Catherine Lutz asked me a question about Virilio and speed, you know, the speed of technology and how do artists keep up with the speed. And I often talk about it, but, you know, we had to keep our talk to 10 minutes, so I couldn't say everything. But one of the things I always say when I give a talk about my work is that I try to work against the speed of technology. I'm really I like to make my bomb drawings. They're very hand done. The cyanotypes, I apply the chemistry to the paper. I place the object on the X-ray film. I feel like I'm trying to make things to slow people down to consider the ideas in the work, because the speed of technology and images and attention spans are so fast, and violence is so fast, and dropping bombs is so fast, and I feel like I'm working against that. Whether that's essentially like a biological difference as a woman, I don't know. I don't want to like argue about essentialism, but I do think I do think generally there are more women maybe trying to come at it from a different place. You know, definitely being in the archives at Caltech, I don't want to make images that are in service to the science of destruction, right? I want to try to make work as an antidote to that or against that. I don't know if that really answers your question, but I do think I'm trying to make things that are also, like when you look at my work, you don't know what you're looking at until you read what, like the autoradiograph, you don't know that that's a fragment of an A-bomb tree until you read about it. It looks just like an abstraction, same with the dead flowers. And so the formal beauty or the formal discipline is really important to me too. Like, so that's the art part of me, but I think that's a strategy for me. Like Andre Breton said, you know, beauty will be convulsive or it will not be at all. And I really do believe that beauty can be subversive, and art can be a tool to try to subvert, you know, the sort of patriarchal dominant narratives of everything, you know, not just science, but all of it, the world we live in, right?
Did you have a particular?
Well, I would say I've learned a lot about science and art through this exhibition and through all the exhibitions with PST Art and the Getty, and just the array of titles and just the different interpretation of science blew me away. Because in my mind, you saw what I saw, it's all about, and so sorry, you know, for my practice, it's really very much about engineering and architecture and materials. And so much of the work, you know, even that I saw from our presentation, it just blows me away because it's something that I would never think about doing. And it gives me just a larger appreciation of the interpretation of science. I would say as far as engaging the science community, and I sort of, you know, I'll put the scientists and the engineers in one bowl, no disrespect, and say, okay, well, how can we engage with them? And so I try to you know, go out into that community and bring ideas to the science and engineer community and say, let's collaborate on this. What can I learn from you to bring into my projects? I have a lot more flexibility and freedom in my projects than, say, scientists do, because it's a very, very different, the profession is a very, very different nature. But yeah, I would say that, you know, an artist or a creative's, you know, something that we're able to do, I don't want to say it's a responsibility or a job, it's sort of an interest of mine to be able to bridge those gaps. And with Claudia's, I mean, your questions and, you know, outlook and just as I said, the curation of the exhibition has opened my eyes to so many different areas. And of course, astronomical artifacts are a very, very easy interest.
I think those of us who are in the academy and, you know, just in the world see that we suffer from this sense of isolating these subjects, particularly as we've noted in this sort of false way. And, you know, one thing that I experienced as the drawing teacher was often an invitation from the science teacher to come and teach students how to draw, because you know, they needed these skills in order to really help them to communicate, help them to visualize, help them to really understand what it was they were looking at. And this kind of conversation is so fruitful, I think, and so needed, because, you know, the problems we're facing are so big. If we're not all sort of working together I'm not sure we're going to solve them anyway, but if we're not at least all working together, I'm sure that we won't. And it is so exciting when you do have those conversations and when you're able to, you know, throw out ideas and help people see something in a new way, and that goes in all different directions within conversations, within projects, within a kind of experiential learning that I see as more maybe prevalent today than, you know, in the past when we were always sort of listening to a lot of lectures as you are here. It would be easier for me if I was teaching you to draw today. But, you know, I just think it's very important that we continue to kind of understand that one of the functions of, you know, problem solving is communication. And when I spent a lot of time in the Gates Annex, you know, in that room, thinking about, you know, why I was there with Galileo or, you know, with all those books, I realized that, you know, they didn't have to put pictures in those books. If Galileo wanted to talk to another astronomer, he could just, like, you know, write in Latin or do the numbers. And so the fact that they became beautiful objects was also something of value, right? And that was really interesting, as interesting as sort of the problem-solving part of it. And so I think for communication and then for this sort of bigger conversation, it's just, you know, it's a wonderful thing if that can happen.
I'd like to open this up so that you all can ask questions, but not before just running one more thing past this panel. I mean, one of the things, and people have commented on this, you know, art and science and a collision of art and science and all this kind of stuff, that some people who have seen the exhibition said what caught them by surprise was kind of the nerdiness of my kind of curatorial approach in looking backwards at art and science rather than a lot of people who do all that cool art and science stuff, they look into the future, right? It's like, what can art and science teach us about the future? Whereas and maybe that had to do with the fact that of course, this was an exhibition that came out of Caltech archives. It was really a reflection also backwards and in constructing a kind of narrative of what it all means, you know? And I thought each of you had a unique way of kind of tackling this and providing answers that are kind of more human rather than technology and what technology can do for you and what it's going to do to the face of the earth and that kind of. So maybe as we're answering everybody else's question, it's something to, I don't know if you care to reflect on that,
well, I definitely think, you know, we learn from history, right? I mean, hopefully we don't repeat it, which we do all the time.
All the time, right.
And I mean, Howard Zinn, who I was so lucky to meet and know, said if we can't imagine a nuclear-free world or if we can't imagine peace, it's never going to happen. And the only way you can imagine it or think of it is to learn from what we've done. And I think archives, and like archives are usually built by the victors, right? I mean, there usually aren't archives of the losers.
But that's why we have artists who go into the archives to excavate the stories.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry,
no,
is that what you meant to
perfect.
say? Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Any questions, or you can, whatever. Yeah.
I was going to mention one thing when you sent us your questions about art and science colliding. And so from spending quite a bit of time in the science world, there were some very, very uncomfortable, awkward moments being when I'm speaking to a scientist or in different workshops where I thought we were all talking about the same thing and we were obviously not talking about the same thing, and how those moments, we can call it failure from our other talk today, or the awkwardness that really bridge this moment of a spark or an idea or an entire new area. And I mentioned a space book that I had done, and there's just a small passage that I want to share with you guys from the introduction of how the idea came about. I promise this will be very, very short. So I was invited to be part of a neuromorphic engineering workshop. So discovering the connections and overlaps between arts and sciences was very exciting to me, as was the invitation from Christoph Koch, then a professor at Caltech, now leading Paul Allen's Brain Institute in Seattle, to be the first visual artist to attend the neuromorphic engineering workshop in Telluride, Colorado. Eager as I was also nervous. I'd never been to anything like the workshop before, and surrounded by brilliant scientists from all over the world. When I arrived, Mark Blanchard, a postdoctoral associate at the University of Neuroinformatics at the University of Zurich, was on hand to help me check in. We sat down at one of the lab computers, and he asked me to create an account by typing my name and a temporary password. New space user was my temporary password, which I typed in. And Mark says no, and he looks very confused and embarrassed. Says type in new space user, which I did. I thought baffled. I retyped this new space user. It was only then did I realize that he wanted me to type new user with 2 words with a space in between. And in the art world, we would never use space as a nothing. And in the science world, it was just a little tap. And from 20 years later, I did a book based on that one interaction that was so awkward, and of course he never said anything about it. But I think putting ourselves into rooms we don't know anything about, asking questions that seem embarrassing or might seem stupid to somebody is really where we get just a spark of inspiration and we can move forward.
I think I just want to say that it's about the invitation. I think, you know, Claudia extended to us an invitation, Peter extended an invitation, and especially for me to go and dig around in the archives and check out all the little boxes and bits. And I think, you know, inviting us to look back to see what we see and how we see it, maybe differently from our different viewpoints or from the time from now, and also just keeping in mind that idea that the invitation can be, you know, maybe from what Shana said, the invitation can be friendly and fun, and that's my relationship with Bob, who I miss, and who really taught me how to appreciate. I mean, I don't know what was in Bob's head a lot of the time, but in the slide that you saw, he was playing the piano, and that we are all really complex people with, you know, regular lives and the food that we like and, you know, the things we like to listen to and the conversations we like to have, so. I think.
Any questions? Yes.
Hi. This day has been brilliant, and the exhibition is phenomenal. I've been brewing a thought since the morning session, and I think, Ellen, you brought it home, and then I'll ask a question. The intersection, the overlap of process, artist, scientist. Imagination is the input, okay? Translation is the output, but then they diverge at application. Do you think, for the applications that don't go so well, is art going to be the only way to wake people up? Music, song, what you do. When will we understand that some applications aren't worth pursuing?
I mean, there's this, when you just talked, the thing that popped into my head that I edited out of my talk, but you know, the Japanese did not know it was an atomic bomb dropped on them until they found X-ray film that was left in a vault in one of the hospitals that had totally turned black. That's how they knew
that it was an atomic bomb. So it was through this image, through this photographic process, if you will, this exposure. It wasn't intended to be applied that way, and it certainly wasn't intended as art. And I'm not saying it is art, but you know, in a way, that autoradiograph I made is kind of similar, and it is art because I'm an artist. But, you know, is it scientific? I don't know. I'm not even sure I'm answering your question. I do think they both can be applied in similar ways and in different ways depending on your intention. You know, I always told my students that there's the context of production and then there's the context of reception. And so depending on what that context is on both ends informs what it is. And so, you know, I think like the woman from NASA, Lois, who talked about Cosmos, that show, you know, that was intended as entertainment and education, like pedagogy, but it's also art and it is science. So again, there's this like false split. I don't know if I'm really answering, but I just wanted to share that.
I think art is one venue. Art is a venue, music is a venue. Some people use film, documentary. I think it really just depends, as you say, on the maker and the receiver. Those are it's a two-part situation.
Yeah, I think when I think about application, I just think about the making part, right? And I think, you know, we all have skills and thoughts about, you know, actual, like the physicality of making, but also just the conceptuality, you know, that goes into making. And I just really feel like I mean, I teach a lot of students who are in our science college, and I do find that they benefit from the kinds of, you know, the other part of that, right? The transformation, the creativity, the imagination, they need that in order to get to the making part that they need to do. And I think that, again, that exchange is really, really valuable. And I've been on some teams of students where we've been problem solving with Otto Bach, creating a transtibial, the new kind of fixture for amputees, and you know, getting the students to play with like the cardboard paper tubes, and you know, just helps them to think in new ways about things. And I think, you know, I like that you're thinking of it in this sort of process, but I think the process is much more like this, and I think it's even more like that if you have more of us at the table together. Yeah.
I also think we need all of it. You know, it's not an either-or sort of thing. And like Susan Sontag would say, you know, the more images you see of suffering and war, you become anesthetized, right? There's a desensitization. Other people would say that's not true, and you can look at the science data and find arguments on both sides. But I think we need all of it. Just like, you know, banning books, no, we need more books, right? The answer to it isn't less speech, it's more speech. So.
We have 2 minutes left on our panel. Yes. Wow. Questions? Yes.
That went by fast.
Oh.
No, I'm sorry. I just wanted to thank you, but also to say, as an educator, as an artist, having taught for years and years, and been on committees to try to determine how we deal with art, how we deal with high school education for students, and how we, you know, deal with curriculum. It's so important to have both, to have them feed into each other. You know, we're so pigeonholed in the way we're being taught these days, or the children are being taught. I'm retired now, but I look at what's going on, and I think we have to combine them. We have to have, you know, stress both the creativity, the individuality, your imagination, your applications and so on, and combine it with the sciences and the technology and the math and all the computer and all of that. So thank you.
We had a question over there, and that should be our last question. I'm sorry, we probably took way too long. Thank you.
I was just reflecting on the juxtaposition I see here, where you have 3 women artists whose work intersect with science.
Could you speak up a little bit? Thank you.
I was talking about the juxtaposition I see here with the curator and 3 artists who are able to basically have a career in art that intersects with science. And I'm reflecting on the two women displayed, whose work are displayed in the nearest, number 5. One is Pamela Lewis, who is a Stanford-trained geneticist, but she was not able to really find a full career in science, but did art, and also helped a lot of people, including her own husband, win a Nobel Prize. And then the other one, and she mentioned that she was trained in drawing by
Edith Wallace.
Edith Wallace, who was also in another piece with all the fruit flies. So I was looking at the 2 empty chairs there, and it would be wonderful if we could have those 2 women there, and we can have a session and see what their experience with historically as completely well-trained scientists who were also artists.
Great. I think we come to a close. It's 6:01. Thank you all for coming and spending part of your lives with us. Thank you.